All right, 25 till the top of the hour. Toll free. Our telephone number is 800-941-SEAN. If you want to be a part of the program, Rand Paul is with us, 2016 presidential candidate, senator from the great state of Kentucky. By the way, how was it that Matt Bevin wins by 9 points in Kentucky and nobody had him in the lead going into that race?
You know, it's funny, Sean. This might be an argument that the pollsters don't know what the heck they're doing. They had him down by 5 a week beforehand, and then he wins by 8, so they're off by 13 points. Think about the presidential debates. We're shaping all of our policy on how we cover the debates based on polling 3 or 4 months out or 6 months out, in which most of the people who are responding are undecided, and then they're telling you who they're leaning towards. So I think really it's a mistake and a disservice to some of those running to make it all about the polling.
I thought you had some really good moments and a good debate on Tuesday night when you talked about if you live in a Democratic state and you have a Democratic governor or Democratic legislature, that's a problem. When you talked, I thought that was a really good moment for you. Talk about it.
Well, you know, the Democrats like to talk about income inequality, and I frankly told people if they want less of it, don't move to cities run by Democrats or states run by Democrats, that there's more income inequality in those states. And I think it sort of turns on its head, this whole mantra the Democrats try to promote that somehow Republicans have something to do with income inequality, since the areas that it seems to be worst are run by Democrats.
I think that's all true. You were the only person when talking about the economy that dealt with the issue of spending, and you mentioned the penny plan. I don't know why every Republican doesn't get behind the penny plan and realize that you can no longer be the party or the Democratic light party, but still a big government party that spends more than you take in.
Yeah, and this is my big concern, and it's why I'm really concerned about whether or not, Marco Rubio is a fiscal conservative, because he's offering up $1 trillion worth of new military spending and $1 trillion worth of refundable tax credits. And if you remember, these tax credits actually have about a 25% fraud rating, and the Investigator General discovered that these tax credits gave $4 billion to illegal immigrants. My concern is if you double down on these tax credits and you expand them the way Marco wants to do it, will more of this money be flowing to illegal immigrants? Do we have enough control on how these tax credits are to think it's a good idea to double a type of a payment that's actually currently going to illegal immigrants?
But I mean, reducing the size of government, getting rid of some government departments, transferring some of the responsibility to states, for example, like on an issue like education, that to me makes perfect common sense. So I think, but you don't hear people address the spending side of things. And spending, since John Boehner's been Speaker, the debt went up $4.1 trillion. That's not what I view as an alternative to what the Democrats are offering. That's more deficit spending. It's immoral to rob our kids blind like that.
Well, it's what I say in every speech as I'm out on the road. Whose fault is it, Republicans or Democrats? And the crowd will respond, both. People get it. The people all along the countryside, they understand that both parties are bankrupting us. And see, when Paul Ryan and Boehner and all these people got together to raise the debt ceiling this last time, they did it because people on the right wanted more military spending and people on the left wanted more welfare. So it really is this unholy alliance of right and left. It's the guns and butter crowd who basically are starved to get money and will do anything to get it. But as a consequence, we borrow $1 million a minute and have a $19 trillion debt. So I truly blame right and left and both parties for this, and I think we're ruining the nation.
I thought that Donald Trump sounded a little like you the other night when he was talking about how often we have ended up as a country supporting rebels to depose one dictator or another dictator, and we end up with something worse than what we originally had. And he was talking about the rebels in Syria in that particular case. I do believe there's some truth to that. But on the other hand, I'm kind of torn with Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz's argument that, if we have a strong defense, it's going to be cheaper in the long run because it's going to scare the crap and bejesus out of anybody that would ever want to take us on.
Well, I do agree. We should have a strong defense. I think we should scare the bejesus out of people. I think we should be so strong that no one thinks that they can mess with us or nobody thinks they can attack us. But that being said, if we spend $1 trillion we don't have, I just don't think we're stronger.
Well, a lot of it's going to depend on economic growth, right? How much money we're taking in. A lot of it's going to depend on whether we eliminate baseline budgeting and adopt something like what you're suggesting, the penny plan.
Yeah, and what it really, though, is if you have an unreasonable expectation now, see, Marco has introduced amendments, and Ted supported him, to increase military spending by $200 billion without offsetting cuts. I told him, look, I'll vote for that, but only if we offset it with cuts in domestic spending, and they wouldn't support that. They only supported increasing defense spending with no offsetting cuts, and that's why I think that they truly come down as not really being fiscally conservative. And that's what these debates should be about. Who is the fiscal conservative? And if you nominate one person or another, will they actually balance the budget? See, everybody up there says they're for a balanced budget amendment, but I've actually put forward a balanced budget, and how many of them will actually vote for a real budget that balances? Not that many.
Here's my plan for the economy. The penny plan, which you brought up, allow multinational corporations that have parked all this money overseas, trillions of dollars in money that they park there, let them repatriate that money at a low rate or no rate to bring it back, and I think that money would be spent on manufacturing here in the U.S. Make America the tax haven of the entire free world with the lowest tax rate, so other companies will be attracted to move their money here. And then, to me, a lot of money is right under our feet, and it's called energy.
Yeah, and this is one of the differences between the candidates' plans as well. I would let people bring their money back voluntarily at a 6.5% rate. I believe under Rubio, Trump, and Bush, they would mandate it at about 10%. And so I don't like mandatory telling of companies they have to bring their money home. I like to encourage them to bring their money home, but I think it's their money. They ought to get to make the decision.
Well, the problem is, but there's a little bit of a problem with that. And this is where the mom and pop shop owner gets screwed, and these big companies take advantage of every loophole available to them. Yeah, they'll park that money overseas. They won't pay taxes on it. They'll be investing in manufacturing centers in other countries and avoiding paying any U.S. taxes because of the way the law is written.
Well, we had an economist look at my plan, which is voluntary, and there's $2 trillion overseas. He estimates that over $1 trillion of it will come home voluntarily, that it would bring in enough to really fund the highway bill for 5 years by lowering a tax rate from 35% to 6%. And they do pay taxes overseas. So they have a plant in France. They pay the taxes in France. But what we have to do is lower our taxes enough that they don't want to leave in the first place and that they do want to bring the money home.
Where are you on this argument when Trump said, if Putin wants to fight ISIS, they just shot an airliner out of the sky, let him go fight ISIS? I think Putin's motives are more nefarious than that. And I think his intentions are that he wants to align himself with Iran and with Syria and take Iraq and move forward from there.
I guess I'm a realist. I look at the world as it is and don't say, in this imaginary world, we're just going to say, Russia, you can't participate in the Middle East. They're already there. And unfortunately, Iraq invited them in, Iran invited them in, and Syria invited them in.
Yeah, but we also created a void. But we created a void.
But this is the point I've tried to make with the others on the stage. Hillary Clinton, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, they all want a no-fly zone. But here's the problem. Russia already flies in that zone. So if you call for a no-fly zone, you're calling for, and they need to be asked this directly, are you calling for shooting down Russian planes? And if they are calling for that, you have to realize how extraordinary that is, that we would have a confrontation with Russia, that we really spent 70 years of the Cold War checking them, balancing them, containing them, but trying not to have an all-out war with Russia. So when Trump sort of flippantly says, let's let them do it, it's not so much that we need to be happy or jumping up and down that they're doing it, but when they do something that may be in our best interest, we shouldn't prevent that from happening. Now, I think Russia is more concerned with propping up Assad than getting ISIS, but if they're smart, and I think Putin is crafty, he'll do a little bit of both to try to get world favor.
Well, I think his intentions are far more sinister than maybe what we're describing here, and I think America's position in the world, if America doesn't lead, that void is going to be filled, and I don't have confidence that it's going to be filled by a lot of good people. What did you make of the report today about the FBI has expanded their probe into Hillary's emails, and they're exploring whether multiple statements violate federal false statement statute, whether or not there's obstruction of justice? It seems like this has gone a lot further than other people had thought from the beginning.
I think it's bad news, and it's going to be hard for her to point and say this is a right-wing conspiracy when it's Obama's administration that's looking into whether or not she committed a crime.
Well, it's the FBI. Aren't they somewhat independent from the Justice Department?
They are, but, they're part of the executive branch. So it's going to be hard for her to argue that this is a right-wing cabal. What I would say that is without question, she did as much or more than David Petraeus did, who was convicted of letting information that was classified get into the hands of people who shouldn't be seeing it. By putting her information on a non-secure, non-governmental server, that alone was committing a crime because it was against the rules, and she dismissed one of her ambassadors for doing exactly the same. But it also endangered national security, and it's been proven that classified material did leak out to people who did not have the standing to be able to see classified material.
Let's assume for a minute that this FBI investigation concludes that, in fact, she violated multiple crimes in which other people have gone to jail or other members of the Obama administration have lost their jobs over, or the far worse than what David Petraeus did. And let's say it's referred to the Obama Justice Department and Loretta Lynch, and she decides to do nothing.
Well, in fact, I think that scenario is not too far off base. That may well be the scenario. If you were a betting man, I think that's probably what will happen. I think, though, that many Americans are going to look and say, do we want a commander-in-chief who was foolish enough to take national secrets and put them on a private server that was not adequately protected, in which many nations probably did read her email and had the ability to read her email? So I think people are going to wonder whether that's the kind of wisdom we want. And there's a lot of things like that. The whole Benghazi debacle, the idea that she didn't provide security when it was requested for 9 or 10 months, that she kept removing security from Benghazi, that hasn't been appropriately or completely litigated. In a national election, if I'm the nominee, I will take her to task, and I will say to all America, it should forever preclude her from being the commander-in-chief, the fact that she did not provide adequate security for the Benghazi mission.
Is there anything the Senate, the House can do now to stop this bad Iranian deal?
You know, my suggestion all along is it should have been put on the table as a treaty, and we should have voted on it as a treaty.
That was my position, too, but, of course, Cardin Corker stopped that.
Well, not necessarily. It still could have been done because they weren't even adhering to Cardin Corker because they didn't tell us about the secret agreements Iran has with the Atomic Agency. So I still would have put it forward. I think we could have put it on the table and voted on it as a treaty. It would have been voted down, and the president would say it's not a treaty, but then the Senate would have said it was a treaty, and we would be at an impasse, and it would be a stalemate. As it is, I think we acquiesced too easily. But this is like everything in Washington. I think the establishment acquiesces on spending, we acquiesce on treaties, we acquiesce on trade. We just Congress has become insignificant, and I think if I were to estimate the power, I would say that the executive branch is 1,000-fold more powerful than Congress because Congress has abdicated their duty.
Well, they've ceded that power to the executive branch, and
Absolutely.
They don't use their own enumerated powers. And this is why I thought Republicans ought to unite and defund Obamacare and defund Planned Parenthood and defund executive amnesty. And they punt and they want to push it to the courts and make the courts use their power. But every time they do that, they're ceding their own constitutional authority. And it seems the Republican Party is so timid, Senator.
Here's the thing every American needs to know. We have the power right now to defund everything. Spending expires automatically. When the budget runs out, when the money runs out at the end of the fiscal year, it expires. We should turn the tables on the Democrats, and we should say, if you want to spend money on Planned Parenthood, get a majority in the House and get 60 votes in the Senate. The supermajority could be used to our favor to get rid of offensive and wasteful
projects. Well, then why doesn't Mitch McConnell do it?
Well, it's both. It's the leadership in both houses don't choose to use our leverage. And I've advocated long and hard that we should let all of the spending expire, and then when it expires, tell those who advocate for spending that the burden is on them to affirmatively pass spending bills. All
right, Senator, we really appreciate you being with us. Rand Paul from Kentucky, presidential candidate. We always are glad to have you on.
Thanks, Sean.
800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program.